Pat Graves was working for the Forest Service as a road contractor and inspector, and perhaps sometimes a timber cruiser, beginning in 1954. He worked in the area of Bluff Creek, California. Graves told Roger Patterson in 1963 that he had seen hundreds and hundreds of tracks year after year, some of them on creek banks 30 or 40 miles back from any logging roads. It was only after finding such tracks that Graves started to give the existence of Bigfoot credence. While speaking with Patterson near Bluff Creek, Graves mentioned finding tracks over at Laird Meadow Road. Patterson literally raced over to Laird Meadow and ended up casting the footprints. John Green and Renee DeHinden met with Pat Graves in July of 1967. Here is Green and DeHinden interviewing Graves, a previously unreleased interview. Please bear in mind that the interview is now 54 years old and the quality is lacking. It's suggested to listen with headphones.
Please support this channel by subscribing and leaving comments. Stay well, stay safe.
This is John Green, I think from Space 1967. Pardon me, at Orleans in 67. How long have you been in this country? Well, I've been in this country since, you might say, 1936. That would be from Redding and Red Bluff to the Oregon border, and west to Eureka and New Mexico. Well, all my life I've built ranks, both factories, and in 1948 I bought my own equipment and started contracting road building. And I've been with that up until past year. I sold all my equipment except one grader. Now I'm still now running around the country bidding jobs and running estimates for other contractors. So I'm actually still in the same business.
Does this involve getting out in the bush where there aren't any roads?
Yes, that's right.
And in doing this, have you ever seen this, what they call Bigfoot tracks?
Yes, a number of times, mostly in the Bluff Creek area. That would be from Wichita and Orleans, mostly north and northwest of the Orleans area. I was a C&M foreman for the U.S Forest Service, and that's in charge of road construction and maintenance in the Orleans district. And that job took me into the Redwood district, would be north and west of Orleans, and also into the edge of the Gaspee district, which is almost due north of Orleans, up in the Elk Valley country. And I have seen these tracks in all of that area.
So, any rough idea how many square miles you've covered?
Oh, no, but several hundred square miles.
And would you recall roughly maybe around what year you first started seeing this?
Well, I will put this another way. I first seen these tracks with a fellow by the name of Ray Wallace, who was a friend of mine when I was in the oil business, working out of Redding, along with my construction. I was selling lubrication to Ray Wallace, living in Willow Creek. And one time in summer there, I don't remember just exactly when it was, I think it was in the summer of 59, I came out and, no, it was for that. It must have been 58. But anyhow, I came out to Willow Creek and waited all afternoon for Mr. Wallace to come home, and he told me that he had just seen the tracks in the Bluff Creek area.
This would be around the first time they started to show up on the road there.
Well, it's the first time I've seen them, anyhow.
So you hadn't seen any in the country until Bigfoot...
Well, I hadn't been out in the bush much. I'd been mostly on highways or building roads further south, down in Van Dusen country and Mad River and down in there. I never did run across the tracks in that area. Now, I came up with Ray and looked at these tracks that time, and then I let it slip my mind. I didn't have paid attention to it. I came back in here in 63 on a contract up at Fort Salmon, one cat, and then I put one cat down on Bluff Creek for the Forest Service, building Forest Service Road. And I seen these tracks then, and then again in 64, late in 63, and several times in 64, these tracks. And that continued up until we moved out of the Bluff Creek area, the road construction crew, along in November in 64. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the flood came in December, January, and we didn't get the roads opened up again in until April or May of 1965. And to the best of my knowledge, nobody has seen any tracks or any signs of him in the Bluff Creek area since the flood of 64.
How big were the tracks that you saw?
Well, there's two sets of tracks. We measured them, and I don't want to give the exact measurements. It seems to me like there was one set that was 5 inches wide and 15.5 inches long, or 15 inches long, and there was another set that was 17.5 inches long and 5 or 6 inches wide. I don't remember just exactly what they were. There was definitely an inch or so difference in length and width of both sets of tracks. Like there could have been a pair of them, one possibly 100 pounds lighter than the other one, too, from the way they made the tracks in the dirt. Now, we found sticks up there on the Laird Meadow Road, inch to an inch and a quarter in diameter, where he stepped on them with the ball of his foot and just broke that stick in two and shoved it into the ground, showing you the tremendous weight that he had. I don't know what you would call it. I mean, you couldn't break a stick like that yourself. You'd have to jump on it. Mm-hmm. And yet where he stepped on it, with his bare feet, it was broken to and shoved right into the ground.
How long a stride would they have?
Well, we measured a lot of them up there, and an average walking stride of this one with the 17.5 inch track was around 48 inches, 48 to 50 inches. And then one time, I don't know why, but evidently he was in a hurry, trotting along, but we measured, there was a bunch of fellows living up there in the camp from North Carolina. And along in front of their camp one night, they were talking about their dogs barking. They had a bunch of bear dogs up there. And so we went out and looked for his tracks, and where we found them, they were running around 6 feet in length between strides, like he might have been trotting along.
Okay. Ever seen him going up some steep hills?
Yes, I've seen these track lines going up what we call a cut bank. That's where we make the cut on the road. And that generally runs at about all 3/4 to 1 slope, or 1 to 1 at the most, flattest slope they put on a cut bank. Mm-hmm. And it didn't seem to make any difference to him. He'd go right up them just like he'd walk on level road.
Ever follow him for any distance?
Well, yes, I followed him one time and come around a cat, mine that had been broke down on the weekend, and we went out on Sunday, the Catskin and I, and one other fellow to put a clutch in it. And we ran into his tracks there around my cat. So after we'd finished the repair, I had trailed him about 5 miles down through the brush and hitting logging spurs and roads and like that, and trailed him back to the main Bluff Creek Road. And I left the trail there and went on back and got my pickup, drove back to the Notice Creek Bridge, where I come back into the main road, and I see his tracks there at the Notice Creek Bridge. So then he'd come off of the mountain where I'd left him and walked back up the road to the past the Notice Creek Bridge.
How would you track him? It'd be through bush country, wouldn't it?
Well, I just watch for tracks like tracking a deer. I mean, I can track a deer like anybody, I guess, that lives in the mountains. And
should ground be soft enough to show tracks?
Well, not necessarily all the time, but you could always see where he kicked over rocks, and then maybe 20, 30 feet while you'd see another track and follow him that way.
Ever notice how deep your own feet were sinking in ground compared to the depth of that?
Most of the time you couldn't see where your foot would make any mark at all. No mark at all where he was leaving prints in the ground.
And how deep would his prints run?
Well, I've seen him on the Laird Meadow Road especially, and down on the Bluff Creek Road that was all sunk into a loose ground along the edge of the road, a half inch.
And have you ever found a track that either started or stopped where it shouldn't have, broke off for no reason?
Well, I don't know what you mean.
Well, of course, people are always suggesting that these tracks are manufactured.
I say that the tracks are not manufactured myself, and only because I have run into these tracks a good many miles out in the country when I was running an estimate the first time on a Forest Service road job. They wanted 15 miles of jeep road constructed. So I drove to the Gasky end of this jeep road and walked back through their flag line to the Elk Valley end of that road, which is around 15 miles of construction that they wanted done to turn in an estimate or run a bid, a bid on the job. However, about a week before that bid come up, I got my one of my new cats and one of the old ones leased out to the railroad, so I give up the idea of it, but I went to Willow Creek and talked to a friend of mine, Art Tonkin, who is in the business, gave him my figures on the road, and he did the road job and was awarded the bid, so he built it. But through that 15 miles of road where I was walking, I'd seen his tracks a number of times. And then Forest Service built a road, it's what they call the Wild Cat Creek Sale. And I walked most of those roads out after the engineers had put in the tree-line stakes and some of the slope stakes. And in all of that area, I've seen his tracks a number of times in different places. Now, my reason for thinking that these tracks couldn't be manufactured is because nobody knew I was going into that country in the first place. And so why would somebody put a set of tracks out there for nobody to look at? I'd say they are not manufactured tracks. I'd like to see what makes them, but I don't think that anybody put them in there for a hope. It would be impossible.
I understand these tracks are sometimes seen walking around a piece of equipment.
Well, yes, run my own equipment when I was working for Sam O'Ness on they call it the Notice Creek Sale. And I also seen his tracks around one of Blake and Tregoning's towers, is one of the logging contractors for Humboldt Fir. That was up above Lonesome Ridge Saddle. And, of course, I think everybody in that working at the tower seen the tracks when they came to work on a Monday morning. However, I had seen them on Sunday, as my mother had came up from Sacramento and for the weekend visit, and I took her out into the Notice Creek area looking for tracks. And we found them around the Blake and Tregoning Tower, and for about a mile above the tower on the, I guess the Lonesome Ridge Road, we'd call it. But anyhow, she took camera pictures of those tracks with a little Donnie box camera, and they turned out real good. She has some good pictures.
Would that outfit be working on Saturday, or would they cut on Friday night?
No, most of the logging outfits in this country more or less close down on Friday night. However, they'll have some of the road crew work on a Saturday, and they also have all the servicemen and the mechanics work both Saturdays and Sundays. And once in a while, some of the cat spinners will work Saturday and Sunday.
So if you couldn't make the tracks for daytime,
no, I don't think anybody could make them in daytime without somebody being around with the possibility of seeing them. And another thing is there's almost always some of this road crew is camped there, somewhere near the equipment.
So Ever formed any idea of how much weight you figure it takes to...
In my own mind, I told myself that he would run somewhere around 800 pounds. That's judging from the distance his feet would go into the ground and also from some of the sticks that I've seen broke where he stepped on them. Take an awful lot of weight to do that.
Ever seen any sign of him pulling branches down or anything like that?
Well, I wouldn't say that because you find broken limbs and brush broke down and trees broke down everywhere you go in the forest. Now, what would break them down, I don't believe anybody could tell you. Bushes broke down, could be broke down by the bears or the deer. Little trees that broke off from the wind, the top broke out of them, from the wind blowing. I don't think that I could say that any of them that I seen was broke down, as I would say Bigfoot broke them down. Mm-hmm. Or vice versa, I wouldn't say he didn't.
Have you ever seen where he's picked up and moved things?
Well, yes. And several different occasions, I've seen oil barrels that's been moved from one place to another. I have seen large galvanized metal pipe moved. I've seen trailers upset that this pipe was loaded on. And on one occasion, all of the crew seen where they parked this trailer on the side of the road one night with a load of culvert on it. It was all 18-inch culvert. I don't know how many joints was on there. It was 6 or 8 joints of pipe, 20 feet long. And it was still tied down to the trailer when the crew went to work in the morning. And it was on a pioneer road. Of course, they had to walk by it. So they walked right directly by it. Well, sometime in the morning, they heard a noise and didn't pay any attention to it. However, at noon, when they walked back down the skid trail, or Pioneer Road, by this trailer, the trailer was upset, turned right upside down, laying on the culvert with the wheels up in the air, and Bigfoot tracks was all around. Now, it so happened that I was on the job that day, all day, myself. However, I had stayed back behind where the captors was working, which would have been probably a quarter of a mile from where this dynamite crew was working. I didn't see or hear anything. However, after they come back at noon and were talking about this, I walked up to the trailer and seen the tracks and the trailer turned over. I also seen down on the lower end of the Laird Meadow Road, well, it would be the lower end, about the middle of the Laird Meadow Road, there's some 48-inch pipe going in. And I know of one time when the contractor left one joint of pipe laying on the trailer overnight. They didn't get it installed, and so they just left it on the trailer. The next morning, when we came back to work, that 48-inch diameter pipe was thrown down the canyon. And there would have been no way for it to have got rolled down there. It had to have been picked up and more or less thrown down the canyon. It seemed like Bigfoot had a mad on for a culvert. About all the damage that was ever done that I know of was to oil barrels or grease drums and culvert pipe. With no damage dollar-wise, I don't think. It started with crew having to go gather up the stuff and bring it back. I don't think there was ever any dollar damage.
What sort of weight would you be lifting to do those things?
Well, I don't know exactly what an 18-inch joint, 18-inch diameter pipe, 20 foot long would weigh, but it's more than 2 men want to pick up and handle. It's actually a 3-man job. 1 man on each end and 1 in the middle ordinarily is the way they handle them. But a 48-inch diameter pipe, and that stuff can run all different lengths, but this joint that I was speaking of, if I remember right, was an 18-foot joint. And that would weigh, well, I don't think 6 men could possibly lift that piece of pipe. Possibly 8 men to pick it up and move it around.
And this is a piece that you say was thrown?
Thrown down the canyon.
How can you determine that it was thrown?
Well, because of the way it went off of the bank. If it had been rolled off of the bank, off of the trailer, then it would have had to hit the ground and go across the road. And it did. The Besides that, there was no brush smashed down or anything else from the trailer to where the pipe was laying down in the canyon. It meant it went through the air to get down there.
How many people would have been around the scene?
Well, the whole culvert crew and the foreman was Tom Osborne and the superintendent, Everett Jurgensen, myself as the road inspector, and probably 6 or 8 other men that was installing that big pipe in the canyon where it went in. Plus the contractor always uses a trap to move that big pipe around. They don't do it by hand.
How did they get it out?
With a line, throw a cable on it, pull it up the cap.
Any of those men still around?
I imagine all of them are still around. Everett Jurgensen, I understand, is down around Corning somewhere. He owns a ranch down there. Tom Osborne's still working the sawmill at Humboldt Fir, running the crane. I don't remember what other men was on the job. Bob Wallen was running the EW10 scraper, and Todd Gray was on a scraper. The culvert crew, the base crew consisted of some of these New North Carolina guys, if they were. I think all of those, or most all of them, are still around the country.
Have you ever known anyone coming here to investigate these facts?
Well, yes, I met several people in here in the past 5 or 6 years. Probably 15 different people from different places have been in here investigating.
Do most of them see facts in the here?
I think the majority of them did, yes. I had a fellow here not too long ago from New Hampshire came in here and talked to me one evening, and then I also seen him on Bluff Creek 1 or 2 days later. It was last year. I don't remember his name. However, he did give me a card when he was here, but like anybody else, after 6 months or so, you get so many cards you go for, you have to put them away.
That's kind of a nuisance coming in all the time.
Oh, no, it don't bother me any. In fact, I kind of like it. I hope someday somebody finds out something about it.
But as far as it seems pretty clear that he's not here now and hasn't been here for 2-4 years.
No, well, since the flood in 64, this would be 2 full years has gone by. And there was nobody who has any tracks in the Bluff Creek area.
Thinking you wanted to ask?
I don't know whether he was killed from some of the slides. It's possible he was buried. If he was in a cave or something along in the Bluff Creek area, that some of those slides went in there, slid for half a mile up the mountain, hundreds of thousands of yards of dirt. Possibly he was buried in there. It's possible that he just got disgusted with this kind of an area and moved away. And I wouldn't blame him much.
Did you see any sign that the tracks were moving back at all as the logging moved into the town?
Well, yes. When the tracks was first seen, it was more or less, well, the first ones I seen was not too far from the Cripple Ranch on the Bluff Creek Road. And the last one, it seemed like each year they would get further back. And that was due to the fact that the loggers were shoving roads further back and opening up more country and just naturally moving him back.
Ever see any sign that he was hostile at all?
No, none whatsoever. I don't think he was. I never had any fear. I always hoped that I'd walk around the corner and walk into him to get a look at him because he didn't want to bother anybody. If he had been so inclined, and any of the fishermen that was camped along Bluff Creek area or up at Onion Lake or any of that country, any of the loggers, Firewatch, or anybody else. So he didn't want to bother anybody.
Ever hear him stealing food?
No, never did, from any camper. Now, there's another thing. You can look at this more in one way. Almost 25% of the campers in the area have complained about bears tearing up their camps and what have you. It's possible that Bigfoot had something to do with some of that. You never know.
Are there no bear in the area?
There is lots of bear.
So actually, as far as you are concerned, after all the observation of tracks, all during this year, say way out in the bush and so, you would say definitely, as far as you are concerned, and the observation and so, this footprints were genuine.
Well, yes, I would.
You have no indication whatsoever ever to see any footprints which you would doubt or which you more or less would look at it and wonder or...
No, the first time when Ray Wallace told me about him, I thought some possibility of a club-footed bear or something like that, making those tracks. In fact, that's what I told Ray when I was talking to him. But After I look them over, and then after I come back into the area a little bit more, I am 100% convinced that this couldn't be the case.
Somebody was to offer you good money to take tracks in there like that. Do you think you could do it?
To make the tracks?
Yeah.
No, I don't think it could be done. I don't think anybody could duplicate those tracks. I wouldn't know how it could be done. I say it would be an impossibility.
Not on the places you've seen the tracks, like on steep slopes and so on.
Well, I don't believe that anybody could duplicate tracks going right down the road.
Any place at all.
Any place. I don't think it could be done.
Can you elaborate on why you...
Well, in the first place, the prints are not messed up. Now, if somebody was going to make them, how would they make them? Would they be on a pair of stilts, riding on the side of a car, or something? They have to be somewhere to make those tracks. None of those tracks are smeared up. They're absolutely even, set in the ground, just like you would walk down the road. Now, if anybody would have been trying to make those, some of those tracks would be smeared. Another thing is, if somebody was making the tracks, how would they put enough pressure on whatever instrument they were using to make these tracks to smash an 1.5 inch thick in the ground, break it in two and smash the ends of it in the ground? It's, I would say, would be impossible for anybody to make those tracks.
Oh, thanks very much.
Well, that's quite all right. I wish I was one with you, fellas. Might run into it someday.
If you're enjoying all this rare and unique content, please show your support by subscribing and leaving comments. Stay safe, stay well.